So, I don't know if you know this, but I'm reliably informed that we are the 16th most listened to medical podcast in the UK, which does make me wonder whether there may only, in fact, be 16 medical podcasts in the country. Matt, have the producers of Diary of a CEO tried to tap you up as a more scientifically reliable replacement yet?
No, not yet. I can only assume they've spelt my name wrong in the email. It's really interesting that misinformation, and specifically medical misinformation via a podcast platform, is being spoken about this week. The more research I do as part of this podcast makes me realise just how much there is out there. There's often no fact-checking, no evidence, and it really highlights the need for a credible and impartial view, which is really what we're striving for in this podcast.
Very well said. Let's make a start.
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Limits with me, Matt Clark.
And me, Mike Forsyth. Matt, I seem to recall we rather rashly promised to take one for the team in the name of science last week. And I'm pleased to say I gave it a go in terms of cold water immersion for 2 occasions at least.
Yeah, I know you did. Because you immediately texted me afterwards, and hang on, I'm going to read this out. Expletive, I had a cold shower, full stop. Feel invigorated, full stop. But miserable, full stop. But alive, full stop. But also very miserable.
And it's slightly embarrassing as well, because I've subsequently realised that the water in the shower was only about 20 degrees, so it doesn't even count as cold water. How did you get on? Did you do any better?
If I'm being completely honest, I did actually forget the number of times my good intentions were like, you've got to do this. I did actually remember today when we were recording, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to do that. I actually went for a run this afternoon and then had a warm shower and then a very cold shower afterwards. It probably was about 21 degrees. The cold water wasn't actually the problem. It was the cold air from the run. It's December at the moment, and it triggered my asthma pretty bad. I've been pretty wheezy since, and I'm now wondering whether I should have just been breathing through my nose more, which of course we're going to get onto more in a minute.
We are, and it's interesting you say that, because today, for episode 4, we're going to talk about a subject that has gained a fair amount of attention on social media in particular of late, and that's mouth taping. So, I don't know if you know much about this, and I don't know what your social media habits are. I don't tend to go on Instagram a huge amount, but I swear that every time I do, every other advert is telling me via the medium of an attractive man or woman that mouth taping has revolutionised their life and their health. So with that in mind, I think it's a really interesting topic to look at. The first time I came across it, I'll be honest, was Erling Haaland. And for those non-sport fans who are listening, he's a Scandinavian robot footballer who scores a lot of goals and makes football look incredibly easy. And he was promoting on a podcast, taping up his mouth, not only to sleep, but also to train. And there have been various claims about the health benefits of this. And essentially, this is placing a porous oral patch across the mouth. You can start by taping it vertically and then leaving it there overnight in the first instance. How about you, Matt? Have you come across this at all, or is this just my Instagram algorithms going a little bit mad?
I hadn't heard of it, and when you told me about it, I couldn't believe it. I thought, my goodness, what a load of baloney. But yes, this is a real doozy of an episode. I think this is in the real realms of, like you say, quackery, but I was keen to learn more about it. I am an allergy sufferer. I am definitely congested in the nose quite a lot of the time because of that, and I think I've been accused by my wife of being a mouth breather. Much of the things that are the antithesis of the objective of this particular strategy.
The first instinct here is to think this is snake oil, this is quackery, but I think we need to give it its due in terms of a lot of people, whether they're right or wrong, promote this as something which has huge health benefits. So I think hopefully we've come into this with as much an open mind as we can. So Matt, lead us off. Tell me a bit about breathing.
Yeah, I think it's important to discuss breathing because it can actually be done kind of right and wrong, but Understanding how it works, I think, is a good starting place. It's a fairly automatic process. It is mediated by a part of the brain called the brainstem, specifically the medulla oblongata. It coordinates the movement of breathing. It's your diaphragm moving downwards. Your lungs then fill because of this negative pressure, and it sucks air in. That process has to be coordinated through your vocal cords to allow the air through. And then above that, you've got the back of the throat, where the nose and the mouth actually join at the back of the throat, which is relevant for this topic because we're aiming to kind of partially close up one of those exits or inlets for air. And I think it's important to outline that there's anatomical differences, that people aren't all the same. We're specifically going to be, I guess, mentioning that people's noses are different, people's tongues are different, people's jaws are different sizes, different shapes. And I think that's really important in that one size definitely does not fit all. It's important to mention that all of these things need to be functioning for breathing to happen. What we're aiming for is this laminar flow of air, which means this smooth flow of air in and out. That can be changed or partially obstructed if the anatomy is not quite right, if something's a bit swollen. If the tone of the musculature in the back of the throat gets a bit lazy, then that of course can change the flow of air as well. And the relevant things in that are, for example, when we sleep, the tone in our breathing apparatus gets a bit lazy. Alcohol can do the same, as can sedative medication, for example. But essentially, what happens when we breathe and why we think the nose is important is that it serves a few functions which can be beneficial when we're taking a breath in. It can humidify the air. It can warm the air slightly. It can also filter the air. We've got tiny little hairs in the air in your nose that filter out some pollutants. So yes, that's the kind of outline of breathing, I'd say, and the differences between going through your nose and your mouth. Mike, do you want to tell us about, I guess, the proposed benefits of nose breathing or taping up your mouth?
Yeah, so I think other than these social media influencers raving about how this has changed their life, more specifically, those people who are promoting mouth taping talk about various benefits. The first of these is something called obstructive sleep apnea, which I know we're going to touch on a little bit because that's actually really important. And there are a lot of claims that suggest that by taping your mouth closed, you're treating this in a way that is much more easily done than the recognised treatments that are available. There's also a lot of talk about oral hygiene. So I guess that stands to reason. You tape up your mouth, you breathe through your nose all night. You're not going to have halitosis, you're not going to have bad breath in the morning, as far as that kind of makes sense, I guess, doesn't it? And quality of sleep is a big one. So sleep is really important. I know we're going to focus in future episodes on sleep and some of the science around that. But everyone is striving for good quality of sleep. And a lot of the claims relate to taping up your mouth, improving that quality of sleep, enhancing performance as a result of that, and enhancing your nervous system. This is where it all becomes a little bit wishy-washy in terms of the terminology. And then perhaps the one that really makes you laugh out loud is improved facial structure. So those are the benefits that are being promoted. Some of them make sense, some of them less so.
I've read some more wacky ones as well. So to touch on the kind of performance enhancing thing, I've seen a photo of Ida Swiatek. Am I right there? There's a photo of her playing tennis with this mouth tape on, which is kind of grimacing with an upside down smile. She looks so miserable. She looks honestly so miserable. And I think her coach has got her doing this, I'm assuming for performance enhancing reasons. And I struggle to understand how this could be performance enhancing. You're limiting your engine by essentially limiting the amount of fuel that it's getting. You're not going to be able to play tennis very long for a partially obstructed airway. And when I say partially obstructed, I think when we're exerting ourselves, it's important that getting air in through your mouth is much faster than going through your nose. So I think it can be pushed to extremes there, can't it? The other things I've read, I mean, Gwyneth Paltrow, I think, is well known for some slightly quacky health products, but I read a quote about her saying that the breathing through your nose helps alkalinize the body overnight. And this is simplified nonsense. The idea that you need to be more alkaline is just insane, isn't it? I think this might come from an understanding that when we exercise or when we're poorly or when we have infections, that drives this acidic process, and that the body or the compartment that's affected can get more acidic. The body is constantly striving to be neutral for the proper functioning of its enzymes. The idea that you need to be more alkalinized is just nonsense. The body is constantly trying to keep you in a neutral position. So any claim of that is just madness. The last one, this is going to make you laugh, Mike. I read about nitric oxide being released from the nose, and apparently it's released a lot from the nose. And when you're breathing through the nose, particularly if you hum, the amount of nitric oxide that is released in the nose by, it multiplies it by a number of by a magnitude of, however, I can't remember the number of the percent. I'm not even going to focus too much on it because I think it's so bonkers. And then the claims I read from this is that nitric oxide is really important in endothelial health, which allows the dilation of your blood vessels. And of course, the assumptions or the claims therein from that is that will be dementia protective, will stop you having heart attacks and strokes, and is also good for erectile dysfunction. So this idea of we should all go around breathing through our noses and humming, maybe, when you're having your dinner with your partner, if you're humming through your nose, then obviously your sex life is going to get a lot better. It's just absolutely crazy.
I guess we can all bear that in mind. One thing I would say, and I guess just to counter that slightly, is that I think with a lot of these things, they can get taken over by these alternative theories and claims. And there are occasions, I think, where that can detract from some potential evidence or some actual potential benefit here. So one of the claims, as we touched upon before, is that this can improve obstructive sleep apnea. So give us some background about OSA. Why is it a problem? Who gets it? And what do we do about it?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, you're right to rein it in. There is some sensible stuff in here, isn't there? So obstructive sleep apnea, or like you said, OSA, is a genuine health issue and concern. And it's also quite a silent disease, isn't it? A lot of people might have lived a long time with this and not known. Those who tend to get this typically have a higher BMI. They might have a larger neck or a large tongue. Sometimes the glands in the back of the throat can be enlarged, the adenoids and the tonsils. When you have obstructive sleep apnea, you're essentially obstructing your airway to a point where you can stop breathing. Most people know a snorer. So snoring is essentially a partially obstructed airway. That's kind of noisy breathing. Obstructive sleep apnea happens when you actually stop breathing in your sleep. Trouble is with that is that you stop breathing in your sleep enough that you wake up a little bit. But you're not actually kind of waking up. And the problem with that is that you're not getting this restorative sleep. And this can happen every time you fall asleep. If you're in a certain position, for example, if that's happening every time you sleep for a long period, it can cause numerous health problems. So that non-restorative sleep can cause things like daytime somnolence, so just feeling tired all the time. Of course, that can lead to problems with you functioning at work. It can lead to people crashing their cars, falling asleep at the wheel. It also causes long-term physical health problems. So we know that it causes high blood pressure, and the ensuing effects of high blood pressure left untreated can cause cardiovascular risks such as having a stroke, having a heart attack. It also tends to increase people's weight if they're already overweight due to this reduced insulin sensitivity, and also the risk of dementia for chronically starving your brain sufficiently of oxygen overnight, or this non-restorative sleep. Which essentially, when we're sleeping, it's our healing process, isn't it? And if it's not happening correctly or efficiently, then it can cause all of these things. There are some treatments for this. I don't know if you've heard of some of these devices you can buy from Amazon, these kind of jaw elevating or jaw protruding devices that can bring the jaw forward, and the reason that's important is that I think a lot of sleep apnea happens at the back of the tongue, this area around the pharynx that can get a bit lazy and can cause the back of the tongue to fall into the airway when you're sleeping. But the mainstay, the kind of gold standard for someone with obstructive sleep apnea is something called a CPAP machine. Do you want to tell us what a CPAP machine is, Mike?
Yeah, CPAP is continuous positive airway pressure, where sufferers have to wear a noisy mask that pushes air into their face. It has to be there all the time overnight. And look, as far as I'm aware, this is effective. It works, but in terms of how convenient it is, how pleasant it is, I guess, as a treatment, that's where we run into issues, certainly.
I'm aware that this is a machine, and by its nature is a little bit noisy, so it's the continuous almost kind of generation of this pressure which makes it low hum. I've had quite a few patients who've come back saying, I was a snorer and my wife was complaining about me snoring and this kind of intermittent harsh sound that it makes when I'm sleeping, and the change from going from that to then having this low hum, almost like this white noise machine that just makes this pressure sound overnight, is apparently a dramatic improvement than what was previously this awful snoring. And I think for patients as well, it's worth pointing out, it's like night and day, isn't it? When you've got obstructive sleep apnea and you go from chronic fatigue and non-restorative sleep and all the issues that we've outlined already, then all of a sudden having a restorative sleep or this refreshing sleep and waking up and being like, wow, I feel amazing. And that's immediate. But Mike, we're talking specifically about mouth taping today, aren't we? What is the theory behind the claims that are being made?
Yeah, of course. So we talked about some of the proposed benefits. So actually, those who propose these benefits talk about the theory behind this. So the theory being, and this in some ways it makes sense, is the feeling that actually if you're breathing through your nose, potentially your tongue is in a better position. It's not falling back in the mouth. There's a lot of claims also about how breathing through the nose increases your parasympathetic activation. You mentioned earlier about how nasal passages filter air better. So I guess that stands to reason again that if you're denying the opportunity to breathe through your mouth, you're going to breathe through your nose, and therefore the quality of air you get in is going to be potentially better.
Yes. Forgive me here, because I'd like to go on a little bit of a rant. Because I took great umbrage to a particular person claiming about mouth taping being the cure, and about breathing being the cure for lots of things in general. And I guess I want to believe it, because this is again, it's a bit like sleep. It's something we take for granted. I think we think breathing is automatic, and it's just part of our functioning. And in many ways, it is automatic, but a better conscious control of it might help certain things. And I really want to believe that, and I think there probably is some merit in some of that, but I think it can be over-egged. There is one particular journalist who you can do a BBC Maestro paid course to learn all about his research and his exercises on breathing. But this particular person, is a journalist turned expert, was claiming that diabetes is directly caused by dysfunctional breathing. And on this podcast, it followed by him making some kind of snoring noises, and then basically saying that, and this obviously, of course, causes diabetes. And I just thought it's very simplistic, isn't it, to say here is a cause and effect, there is a direct link between this and that. But this is so oversimplified. There are so many confounding factors. The ignorance in this statement is so misinformed. It's so inflammatory and so outright offensive to me, let alone someone with diabetes, to say that their disease process is caused by them breathing improperly, particularly someone who has a genetic form of diabetes. I mean, he goes on to say, things like asthma, for example. I think he actually said every case of asthma could be cured by a child learning to breathe correctly. Now, for the extremely poor child in intensive care with a winter virus that is exacerbating their asthma to the point that they're really sick, imagine telling them, or telling their parents that this is because they're not breathing correctly. So James Nestor, if you're listening, please reach out, as I would love the opportunity to discuss this and understand your research better on this.
Very well said. So, on the topic of research, let's have a brief look at the evidence. Spoiler alert here, there isn't a lot. There aren't that many studies that have been done on mouth taping. The evidence is anecdotal at best. There was a small study that was done a few years ago. This showed, with fairly weak evidence, but that the porous oral tape could be a useful device to treat patients with mild obstructive sleep apnea and habitual mouth breathing. Okay, so that was the best I could find, that there was perhaps a little bit of improvement in terms of symptoms and tiredness. Other than that, as I said, there haven't been that many studies, and most of this is anecdotal, which moves us on, I guess, quite nicely to the other side of the coin on this, and that's the risks. So I think anyone with an ounce of common sense would think that perhaps taping up an airway might have risks.
I have had a chance to look at this. I've also tried it. I tried it 2 nights ago. Admittedly, not with any of this branded tape that you would buy from Instagram, just with some sellotape. And like I said, I suffer with kind of nasal congestion, and I try and use a nasal steroid spray from time to time to improve upon that. But I do tend to breathe a fair bit through my mouth. But anyway, taping my mouth with some sellotape, with my wife next to me reading her book. You can imagine the scene when I start kind of whistling through my nose quite loudly for about 30 seconds, cue my wife to roll over and say, "What the hell is going on?" To me, then trying to laugh with my lips taped together and a dry kind of winter cracked lips. And it was absolute agony trying not to laugh with her bemused expression looking at me. So I think one of the risks of this is some lip trauma. I think another risk is looking like a total plonker. But seriously, we've talked about obstructive sleep apnea, and there might be anatomically some patients who get some benefit from this for the redirecting preferentially nose through the airway may improve their sleep because of their anatomy. But I think for a lot of people, like we say, one size doesn't fit all. And if you've got nasal airway issues, there's a risk of partial obstruction, aspiration. I mean, I don't think it's going to get to that point. I think you probably wake up and take the tape off, but definitely it could cause some panic and some anxiety.
So as someone who's shared a tent with you, Matt, on various occasions, I can honestly say that I was tempted on to tape your mouth shut with sellotape too. I wasn't going to admit this, but I actually also tried this yesterday as well. It's a little bit of an experiment. Now, the caveat here is that the only implement that I could find to tape my mouth shut was a Boots own brand child's plaster with, I think, Bluey or a dragon on the back. And I taped my mouth shut, and I woke up a few hours later, as I often do, and other than having had some quite disturbing dreams about drowning, I felt a bit ridiculous, and I took it off and threw it away. So not the most perfectly performed study of all time, but I guess an interesting thing to do.
Good. Okay, let's try and wrap things up then. What are your kind of closing thoughts on this after looking into it a bit further? Has it changed your mind? Will it change your practice? I think I know the answer, but...
Okay. Yeah, so I tried to look at this, as we said at the beginning, with as much of an open mind as possible. I'm not going to be taping my mouth shut anytime soon. I'm also not going to be promoting this to anyone. And if you'll allow me a brief rant, I think this speaks to something, that the whole concept of mouth taping and all of these similar techniques, it speaks to something more fundamental. And that's really the desire for a quick fix for what is essentially a complex issue. Now, whether that relates to lack of support from the health service, difficulty accessing this on the health service, but I feel as though there's so many companies out there that see an opportunity for exploitation. They get an influencer and they claim that that's changed their life, and they're preying on vulnerable people who are retired or who are suffering with real health conditions. Also, then casually mention at the end of their adverts, if you're uncertain, speak to your doctor, which, given the pressures on the health service, there isn't a healthcare practitioner out there who would be particularly keen for an appointment to be taken up for someone to say, is it safe for me to tape my mouth shut? Ultimately, this is a serious problem that's being reduced to a quick fix with a 30-second Instagram ad. And that's my issue with this here.
You make a good point. And I think the algorithms make the most profound claims more interesting. And the more people who listen to that and watch that, it goes up the algorithms, and that's what then gets spread to more people. So it's almost like, how sensationalist can we be? And also, I think self-help can be addictive, can't it? I think the sense of self-improvement whilst passively listening to a podcast can feel productive, can make yourself feel a bit better. Though when you're constantly being told you're breathing wrong, eating wrong, digesting wrong, sleeping wrong, or whatever it is, will of course drive streams and sales of this product, but it will also undoubtedly increase this anxiety that, gosh, actually we're doing everything wrong. I'm not doing everything right. Maybe I need to tape my mouth up at night. I think with mouth taping, I guess I'll conclude that there may be some benefit. There may be some people who do get a better night's sleep because of their anatomy. I think that cohort of people is going to be pretty small. The oral hygiene, I'm not a dentist, but I guess I can understand why not drying your mouth out might help. But again, I think I'd need to see some more compelling evidence on that. And also the claims things like that it improves your jawline. Seriously, give it up.
Thanks, Matt. Fully agree. I'll end just by saying, if you've liked this podcast, please follow us. Please spread the word. It's been really great to have some feedback from people. I've had loads of people get in contact with some suggested topics for conversation, sent me some really interesting papers and articles to have a look at. So please keep that coming, and see you for episode 5.